Are you ready? Well, get comfy, folks. It's story time. Apologies since this is a long post, but I just need to get this off my chest. I'll start off by saying I'm a 24-year-old straight Asian male. This will be important later on in the story. About 2 years ago, I was extremely depressed. I smoked a lot of weed, antisocial and suicidal. Anyway, I quit my job and decided to try a new city, thinking that would help me with my depression and suicidal tendencies. So I got into contact with my uncle, who is gay, and he graciously decided to help me out. So shortly after I moved in with him and his boyfriend. They were in their 50s and had a 3-bedroom apartment with an empty room that they let me use. I found a job and started paying rent. Everything was fine at first, albeit his boyfriend Kevin. Before I continue, I want you to know that my uncle desperately tried to hide his sexuality. Even though my entire family knew he was gay, none of us cared. He's family, and we're all just a little too busy with our own lives to really care. My uncle was not the issue here, it was his boyfriend Kevin. Kevin was 50-something years old, he was overweight and just a weird person. You know those people you meet and straight away you notice something's just a little off about them. I just wrote it off as him being giddy and excited about having a new roommate. I should note that Kevin has a few health problems, like he's bipolar and he has thyroid problems and a few other issues that I forgot about. He was also extremely childish. Some time had passed since I moved in, and that's when Kevin started to get a little too comfortable or confident, I'm not sure which. But he told me he was gay and that he was in a relationship with my uncle, and told me not to tell my uncle he told me this, to which I abided by. I told him that I already knew, along with my family, and not to worry. A few days had passed, and that's when it started. We were sitting on the couch watching a movie, or if he was just sitting anywhere near me, he would put his hand on my leg and start rubbing my leg, asking me if that made me uncomfortable, to which I would say yes. He would very often take pictures of me without my consent, and sometimes without me even knowing, and so on and so forth. He did all this while my uncle wasn't around. I told him very sternly that I was straight and I have no interest in men, and to cut it out or I would tell my uncle about everything he was doing. And needless to say, it stopped for a time. I moved in with them when they had about 3 months left on their lease. After it ended, they decided to renew it for another year with my name on the lease. And about 5 or 6 months after the lease renewal, Kevin and my uncle were having some issues. They would fight and argue a lot, typical relationship stuff. One day it got really bad and they broke up, and my uncle said he was moving out, but he would still pay his portion of the rent since his name was still attached to the lease contract, and that he would come by regularly to check up on me, and I just said, okay. I didn't ask any questions, I just let it go, since he said he was still going to pay his third of the rent. After my uncle moved out, that's when things really started to get creepy. He would tell me how he wished that I was his son, and how he would have loved to see me as a baby. And right after that, he would flirt with me, by saying I'm cute and he found me attractive, and that he has a fetish for Asian men. Kevin was white, by the way. Sometimes he would just be staring at me. If I caught him looking, he would not look away like any normal person would. He would continue to stare. I mean, it was really making me feel uneasy. I could go on, but I don't want to bore you with the details. Let's just say this creep was heavily flirting and making subtle advances, even though I would tell him to stop and remind him I'm straight. We've actually been in many fights because of this. It was all verbal, non-physical. Then shortly after he would start crying and throwing tantrums. It seriously felt like I was dealing with a 5-year-old child. This went on for a little while, until the lease was coming to an end. There was about 1.5 months left on the lease, and I told Kevin that I was getting my own place, and that he should do the same. That's when the shit hit the fan. I would notice my boxers would go missing. Shirts would disappear. I've even caught him sneaking into my room while I was asleep. He even told me he jerks off thinking about me. Now you're probably thinking, why didn't I tell anyone about this? And the truth is, I was kind of embarrassed by this whole situation. I mean, come on, think about it. A 23-year-old, just turned 23 at the time, can't handle a 50-something-year-old gay man hitting on him. It just sounds like a bad sitcom. I eventually found an apartment, and even though there was a few weeks left on my current lease, I said screw it and started moving out. I didn't have much, just a bed, a dresser, a TV and my clothes, and my friend was nice enough to let me use his truck to get my things moved to my new place. It was on moving day when I noticed Kevin was gone, and I didn't know where he went, and I didn't really care, but something urged me to check his room. This whole time, I never went into his room because I respect people's privacy and their space, but I don't know, something just told me to go into his room, so I went in, and I saw it. I seriously can't make this shit up, and I'm completely honest when I say this, but I saw a little shrine with all my belongings that went missing, and even garbage that I threw away months ago, for instance my old toothbrush, empty soda bottles, so you get the idea. There, along with all my missing boxes, shirts and pictures. Oh god, the pictures. This creep had hundreds of pictures of me sleeping, and then also pictures of me at work, and a few of me naked in the shower. There were hundreds, literally hundreds. At that moment I felt so violated, disgusted, angry, and for some reason guilty. I searched his room for more creepy things. Thankfully there were no more, other than the shrine. I took everything and burned it out in some field and got the fuck out of there. Later that night I was completely moved out, and Kevin probably came home to notice I was gone, along with the shrine. And long story short, he went batshit crazy, texting me and calling me non-stop, making threats and sending me creepy, perverted texts, to which I got a restraining order against him. It's been almost a year since I last heard from him. I don't know what he's up to now, and I really don't want to know. On a side note, if you've made it this far in this incredibly long and boring post, then I congratulate you and wholeheartedly thank you for reading. I just felt the need to get this story out, since it's been bothering me for a while, in the hopes to be able to move on again. Thank you for reading. This is my cousin's story, but I don't think she would mind telling it here. It's always stayed with me because of how terrified I would have been if it had happened to me. I'm not sure if it will be allowed, since it didn't happen directly to me, but it's scary enough for me to share. Back in the early 90s, my cousin and her family lived in 7 acres of land in the Texas Hill Country. Back in those days it wasn't as touristy popular as it is now, and getting from one place to another took on average 45 minutes to an hour to get to town or a regular grocery store, which meant they were all used to driving far to each place, and there not being many people around. There also were not too many neighbours in the boonies where they lived, but they were aware of people living around their property down the road. My cousin at the time worked in town, and my uncle, aunt and 2 other cousins had jobs or were in school on this particular day. My cousin Sandy was very tall and attractive, with your typical lifeguard beach babe figure. She was tanned, dark-haired, with a huge perm, and I'm not sure if she was lifeguarding at the time, but she got off work pretty early in the day and headed home by herself. They lived in 2 trailer homes on the property, with the main one having a huge bay window in the kitchen that had the windows open for a breeze, since they lived on a hill and were able to keep it cool. The second trailer home door was lined up with one of the doors on the first trailer in the back, so they were both connected to each other, if that makes sense, with the one with the bay window being in front and the second smaller home connected at the back. There was also a huge deck porch area in front of the front door and one window that my uncle had fantastically got the idea of tinting, so there was no curtain or blind next to the door. In other words, you could see outside, but they couldn't see in. So Sandy gets home and is walking around doing stuff when someone knocks on the front door. She didn't hear a car pull up and wasn't sure of who it could be. But she was alone, so she peeked out the tinted window and saw a man standing there by himself. She had seen that man walking on the street down the road on her way home, but didn't think anything of it since they had neighbours somewhere further out and figured he was one of them. He keeps knocking and she remains silent. Then he says something that chills my bones. "I know you're in there. I saw you come home." She grabs the cordless phone and hides in the hallway. At the time she can hear him leave the porch and start walking around the trailer homes. She could hear him saying, "I know you're in there. open the door. From the open bay window in the kitchen, and hears him moving around the house outside and continuously knocking on different parts of the houses. She goes into her parents' closet and calls the cops and hides there. Mind you, they are miles from town, no one is around. My cousin is completely alone. And these are the days before cell phones. I don't know how she managed not to have a panic attack or faint hiding in the little closet, because I know I would have. I'm not sure how long the cops took to get there, but they did, and were able to get the guy. Apparently he did live in the area in some ghetto shack, according to my cousin, and when they busted him he had some drugs on him. As this is happening, my hard-ass biker uncle gets home from work and the officers tell him what went on. They put the guy on the porch, and my cousin identified him as the guy that was knocking through the tinted window. As the cops put him in the car, they leave the door open and tell my uncle to go ahead and say whatever he needs to say to him, because I think everyone knows that the guy probably wanted to do who knows what to my cousin. The cops turn their backs, and I don't know if my uncle hit the guy or threatened to kill him if he ever came back, but he never did. Side note, my cousin's Rottweiler got shot and killed a little while before all this happened, and my cousin was convinced this guy was the one that did it. Alright, so let me start off by saying a few buddies and I smoke weed fairly regularly, parked outside my house in a car. I live in a suburban neighbourhood, so in general you wouldn't expect sketchy behaviour going on. Now, when we smoke, it's very late at night to early morning. During our time smoking we have definitely witnessed some sketchy behaviour. The most prominent right now would be a recurring series of events. I don't know if this happens every night, but it seems that every single time we're out late enough to catch it happening, it happens. Now the earliest I've witnessed this happen was 1:48 AM, and it seemed to always happen at around 2 AM. However, lately it's gotten later and later. It started happening around 2:15 to 2:30, and the most recent time it happened was at like 3:15 or so. That time we were there until just after 4 AM, and something else happened. I'll explain that soon. Here's what happens. Every time it's a silver or grey minivan, they speed through the neighbourhood much faster than the 25-mile-an-hour speed limit. After they pass my car, they start slowing down quickly. They then stop outside the mailbox of the house across the street and 2 houses down, on the left-hand side of the road. They only stop there briefly, while placing something in the newspaper box below the mailbox. They then move up to the next house down and do the same thing, but this time they take a bit longer. Like the first box takes 5 seconds and the next one takes 20 to 30 seconds. Keep in mind they're not placing it in the actual mailbox, which is technically a federal crime, just in the newspaper box. One would assume the reason they are doing this late is so they can drive on the wrong side of the road, to put flyers or ads in the newspaper box without having to worry about oncoming traffic or having to walk and do it. Here's my question though, why is it only those 2 houses? Now, the most recent time, shortly after this happened and the car was long gone, a friend of mine took it upon himself to leave the car and investigate. He only checked the first box and said that it just looked like a bunch of books or something. He didn't check the second one. Fast forward to some time after 4 AM. We start to leave so I could drop him off at his house. I drive down the road and we look in both boxes and see nothing but pages. You know, standard stuff that goes in a newspaper box, but not a newspaper, just pages. And it looked like a lot more than your standard flyer or ad. Right when we pass the house we see a black sedan coming the other way around the curve. The road curves to the right if you're sitting in my car at this time. He passes us, and as we go around the curb we see this black sedan brake and stop at the second house, the one my friend didn't check that the van stopped for longer at. For about 5 seconds before we get around the curve and out of the line of sight. I go straight and stop at the stop sign. The guy drives past me from my right to my left. This road just loops around. Then I take a right, as if going back to my house, and go around the curve and go straight to the houses to see if there's anything different. The first house has all the pages still there, but the second one only has 1 now. Perhaps an envelope? Remember, this happens every single time out late enough to see it. It could happen every night. It can happen every other night. I have no clue. Here's another 2 events I only witnessed once that are strikingly similar but could be total coincidences. The night before this most recent event happened, I was at the same friend's house, the one I was taking home when I saw the black sedan. It was 2 AM, the same normal time of this happening in my neighbourhood, and I'm not normally outside his house this late. I was waiting in my car for him to come out to my car and get his stuff that he left. While waiting, I saw a black Jeep-like vehicle turn onto his road and speed. It looked like it could be one of those ugly Chevy boxy cars. He slowed down and stopped at the second house from the corner on the left, again on the wrong side of the road. He also took a short amount of time on this box and then drove up a few feet and stopped a bit longer on the next newspaper box down. He then took off and ignored all the other mailboxes. The day after seeing the black car and 2 days after seeing the black Jeep-like vehicle, I was driving from my house to this same friend's house with him in the car, taking him home. There's a country road that connects 2 bigger roads. On this country road, I passed someone with their left blinker on, pulled over at a mailbox on the wrong side of the road. This one was a grey sedan, looked to be less than 10 years old but completely beat up like a total piece of shit. About 5 seconds after I passed them, they started really trying to speed up on me. I hit the burners on him and floated off out of the line of sight long before he could get to the turn on the bigger road. I was going over 70 and a 50 just to get away. Who knows if he was trying to run me off the road? Not like he cares about the state of his car. Keep in mind, when I say he or him referring to the other drivers, I have no idea if that's their actual gender. Yes, I just assume their genders. Come at me, SJWs. Now, all of this said, the 2 other things that happened could be coincidences, especially the second, but I want the community of Reddit's input on this. I will be checking that second newspaper box tonight or tomorrow night and updating what I find, but here's my theory. I think the thing in my neighbourhood is an acid drop stop. Nobody would think of going in the back of a suburban neighbourhood at 2 to 4 AM to catch a drug deal. Nobody would think someone is up and witnessing this event at 2 to 4 AM. All I can think is it's acid, because it was sheets, pages. Looks inconspicuous from the side when driving past the newspaper box, but I bet they hide the sheets under the ads in the second house, and the first one is a decoy. Then the sheet I saw left over after seeing the black car stop there could have been an envelope with payment. What do you guys think? Do you guys think the owner of the house is in on it, or just happened to be situated perfectly at the back of the neighbourhood in an ideal spot for a drop and are completely innocent and unaware? If it's drugs, should I take the drugs? Should I take the drop money? I was thinking, if it's sheets of acid, I'll take a sheet, or maybe half a sheet. Then the next day I'll take the drop money and then report it as suspicious activity. The buyer will think the dealer shorted them and confront them. The next day the dealer will see the acid is gone but there's no drop money. The buyer will swear they didn't take anything, but the dealer will have already been reported to the police, making the buyer the most likely snitch. The dealer will think the buyer, out of anger for shorting, stole the acid and didn't leave money, then snitched. Win-win for me. Free acid, a little to take, a lot to sell, and free money, with crime taken out of my neighbourhood in the meantime. What else do you guys think it could be? Do you guys think these events are related in any way? What do you think I should do? I'll edit this post with any updates. If my friend witnesses the same thing I saw outside his house happen, I'm going to say it's not a coincidence. I'll let you guys know what I see when I check in the upcoming nights. My curiosity is getting me so hard. I'll make sure to bring my phone and take a picture or video of what I see when I investigate it. I've witnessed this thing with the van easily over 5 times while recognising the pattern, but I'm sure I've witnessed it more than 10 times and didn't connect the dots. It's happened several times with multiple different friends witnessing it with me. Let me know what you think, guys. By the way, every time we saw a car, we'd make sure to turn off any lights, phones and get low, because we were smoking and wanted to stay low key. I think if I took the cash and reported it, the first suspected snitch would be the buyer, the second being whoever lives in that house. The newspaper boxes are normally fairly empty, as I found that newspapers are generally thrown in a bag to the doorstep. The newspaper boxes are just used for ads and flyers that are given to everyone in their neighbourhood, not just to specific houses. The first house I think is a decoy and not involved. The dude I worked with when I was working at McDonald's. He's younger than me, I'm only 20, and we went to school together. Okay, I'm getting a lot of people telling me the same thing. I've decided I'm not going to steal anything, but I have to figure out what it is. My curiosity is seriously killing me. When I was in my second year of university, I lived alone. It was a downstairs flat with my bedroom facing towards the street. I had some heavy green curtains, so I didn't mind too much. My friends lived about a 15-minute walk away, and I would go over every other day, till sometimes around 3 or 4 AM to sleep over. I had a long-distance boyfriend at the time, so would sometimes be up late Skype sexting. Halloween rolls around and I'm out with my friends. I decide to go back to mine and be a sexy Skype supergirl for my boyfriend. We get into it, we're having a really great time. Curtains closed, lights off, just to be safe. I'd had a drunk man trying to get in one time. I fell asleep early and left the curtains open. It had been super creepy. I woke up to the sounds of someone trying to push open the front door. When I looked up, there was a man, staring, stood so close his nose almost touched the window. I'd freaked out and spent the night in the living room. So the lights were off, curtains shut. I noticed a kind of flickering in my peripheral and looked around. While meeting at the bottom, the curtains parted very slightly near the top. Through the gap there appears to be a trail of steam rising. I cover myself and get up to investigate. I have to get up and stand on my tiptoes to see through. I'm a short ass. The source of the steam was a man's mouth. Hunched over and panting, exposed at the waist, violently stroking his member. I try to quickly rearrange the curtains, grabbing my laptop and hiding in the living room. A few days later, there is a pink envelope waiting for me when I walk through the door. As I pick it up, various small change falls out. Written on the lip of the envelope in jagged capital letters. I mean you no harm. Kiss, kiss, kiss. A horrible cold feeling spread through my body. Dread overlapped by shock. I'd never felt anything like it. I turned the card over to read the address side. There in the same handwriting. To the girl in the front room. Opening it, I see it's a quite traditional sort of card, cream with the delicate watercolour of a bouquet on the front, thinking of you in gold curvature next to it. Inside was completely covered by a message, completely in capitals, some letters backwards and words misspelt. I gave the card to the police, so can't recite the whole passage verbatim, but the essence was, I'm an old man who has lived on this street for a long time. I wasn't sure if he meant my street or the streets in general, more on that later. You made me the happiest I've ever been in my life on Halloween. I'm sorry I scared you. You are very beautiful. I love to watch you, whether you are working on your computer or touching yourself. Please leave the curtains open just a little bit for me. For each time you do this, I will post a couple of pounds through the letterbox. Signed, Ken. XXXXXX. I called my friends, then got the police to come round. Basically, they couldn't really do anything. They took the card as evidence, gave me a case number, and said that they would get the patrol car to drive past my house for the near future. I stayed at my friend's for a week, and had one of them stay over at mine after that. That wasn't quite the last of Ken. Sometimes there would be a knocking at my window, but I kept my curtains 100% closed. 3 or 4 months of no incidents later, we got snow. I was leaving my house, now in the habit of checking my curtains every time I left or got back to the house. And I see a set of footprints tracing the entire front window back and forth, like someone had been pacing. After I moved, my friend had a job where she could check the local electoral register. We did find that a K Mordew lived on my previous street. We did no further investigations. because it was a studenty area. I would walk past that house on my way home for the next 2 weeks. A while after I moved out, I saw that the windows had been completely covered in newspaper, stuck from the inside. It seemed like someone was having trouble with Ken still coming around. Let's not meet again, Ken, okay?